Greetings, strangers. Take a seat, sit back, and stay a while and listen, because we're here with Rod Fergusson and Joe Shelley from Blizzard to talk about Diablo 4. How are you guys doing?
Doing great.
Great.
So, Diablo 4 is being described as the next evolution of the action RPG. What would you guys say Diablo 4 is doing that is pushing the action RPG genre forward?
So much. It's a huge game, and there's lots of innovation. It's the first time we've had such a huge shared open world, from players campaign through the world to defeat Lilith to over 100, nearly 150. In fact, there's so many dungeons it's hard to keep track, honestly.
Yeah, I think for me too, beyond the sort of the shared open world aspect of it, is just one of the big design pillars. Like Joe as game director is really pushing this vision around player choice. You know, and the idea that not only can you, previous Diablo games, you were the barbarian, and now you can be any barbarian. You can create your own backstory in the sense that you have your own customization, the depth of skill choices that you have. It's a non-linear story, so you can play it out of order. It's an open world that you can explore any way you want to. You can choose to play PvE and PvP. You can choose to play alone or with others. And so everything we're doing is really focused on choice. I think that's something that really pushes the genre forward.
Speaking of the barbarian, you just revealed the Necromancer. So, what made you guys decide to revisit this class and make it a character that people get to play right out of the gate? Because Necromancer is typically a character that has been introduced in expansions.
The Necromancer is a class that works so well with the Diablo gameplay. And when we're approaching Diablo 4, we really wanted to make it a combination of all the experiences that have come before, whether it's the returning to darkness that we saw in Diablo 1, a lot of the really crunchy mechanics that you could get into in Diablo 2, and our revised Fergusson system, which is Captain Diablo 4, is a great example of that. To the really frenetic and faster-paced action combat of Diablo 3. We've made innovations across the board, but when we're looking at the classes, we wanted to make sure that we were hitting those classes that players have loved throughout the franchise and always want to experience. And Necromancer is front and center.
Yeah, and it really speaks to that idea of the return to darkness that Diablo 4 represents, that idea of the tone of D1, as Joe just talked about, that idea of working with the occult and dark magic and summoning the undead, and so it really leans into that feeling of it. And it is such a favorite. It's personally my favorite, and so I'm excited to be able to get, and not only is the Necromancer you kind of know and love from the previous games, but it is actually quite a bit different, and so those differences is what makes it really exciting for D4.
Well, let's jump into those differences, because there's been different variations of the Necromancer all throughout the history of Diablo, from 2, 3, and Diablo Immortal. What would you say are the main differences of the Necromancer class in Diablo 4?
When we talk about player choice, which is so important to Diablo 4, one of the things that we really wanted to do is introduce a unique class mechanic for each of our 5 classes, so that the experience of playing one class is totally different from the experience of playing another class. And the mechanic for the Necromancer is the Book of the Dead, which allows you unprecedented control over your army. You can configure your skeleton minions to be all kinds of different skirmishers, to mages, even skeleton priests, and you can configure your golem similarly with the Iron Golem making a return.
Yeah, and it really allows for that notion, because that's one of the things when you play in the past, it's like, oh, I can have minions, but my control over them has been somewhat limited, and now you can have skeletal warriors, and there's up to 3 different kinds. You can have skeletal mages, and there's 3 different kinds. You have a different golem, there's 3 different kinds. And so how you choose to your play style, do I want to play aggressive, do I play defensive? In fact, there's a way to sacrifice all your minions to just make yourself more powerful, so you can just be this sort of uber dark magic necromancer that he doesn't even summon anything, but is able to use blood magic to destroy everything on the battlefield.
Amazing. Oh my God. You touched upon it earlier, but let's jump back to it. Tell us about character customizations. Will players have unrestricted options for character customization right from the start, or is it something that they can unlock new features that they can then adjust their characters while they're playing the game?
Yeah, so, in Diablo 4, we think of your class more as a vocation that any person could do, potentially. And we wanted anyone who's playing the game to be able to create a character that either represented themselves or represented who they wanted to be in the game, and then match and use that character to represent the class that they choose. So you can create really anyone you want to look like.
Yeah, I think that, we have a choice right now where there's a sort of a body type because it fits well with sort of the armor and everything, the gear that you have. So like druids are proud dad bods kind of thing, which I completely associate with. But beyond that, like the ability to change the face and how you look and with the hair and your markings and your tattoos, and as we talked about, like the barbarian from say D3 was this white-haired barbarian that came from Mount Ariat, and it had its own thing. Where now you can be completely different and make it your own, and that really helps with the immersion and the fantasy that you're able to kind of lean into your role playing and what you want to be as a barbarian or as a necromancer.
So Diablo 2 and 3 followed this act structure that was pretty integral to those games. And in each act, you'd have like a home base that you could return to with town portals and the wilderness area that sprawled out and had different waypoints that took you to different spots. How does this change with the move to open world design?
Yeah, it took us a while to figure out how town portals should work, actually, in a big open world, but we figured it out.
So town portals are in Diablo 4?
They are, and they'll take you back to, you can go to waypoint to a particular place if you want to, or you can town portal to the nearest major city. Diablo 4 has a non-linear campaign so that you can do the story content in different pieces, which allows you to replay the campaign in a different order, which is fun. And the world is, the campaign takes you all over the world, but there is lots more world to discover after you finished it.
Yeah, it's part of the exploration is finding all those waypoints and the ways that you can travel around. And so that's part of the exploration is that you're with those 150 plus dungeons and with all the different waypoints that are out there, all the local events, all the world bosses, like there's a real reason to go out and venture into the world and see what's out there. And so that's part of it. It's not just, I'm on this path, this golden path through the story. There's a whole world out there for you to explore with very different biomes or environments with different monster families, and that's part of the fun. And it's actually one of the things that we just recently added as part of our testing is this progression through a zone to know, have I found everything or not? And that really I'm kind of a completionist, and so that notion of like, did I find all the dungeons? Did I find all the waypoints? It really helps sort of incentivize you to go exploring.
You mentioned earlier the 150 or nearly 150 dungeons they have in this game. Are these similar to the dungeons of previous games with procedurally generated layouts and rewards, or are they something completely new and different?
They do have procedurally generated layouts. Monster placement's going to be different every time. You're going to get different rewards, but they're really grounded in a sense of place, and that means that you can do more planning about how you're going to tackle them, which really becomes important when you get to the end game and you start to get into nightmare dungeons. In the nightmare dungeon system, you can get these keys, sigils, that allow you to upgrade a dungeon out in the world to become a nightmare dungeon, granted additional affixes and powers. And the powers are the effects on the dungeon are actually based on the keys. So you're going to get a lot of keys. You might find keys for dungeons that you think are less well suited to your build or play style, and you don't have to do those. So you have really, again, a lot of player choice there.
And one of the things I love is the new addition is like when you get into that end game too, and you're doing sort of the, working for the Tree of Whispers, this idea of do a dungeon, that, this dungeon is sort of biased towards helmets. And because I'm looking for a particular legendary helmet. And so there's certain dungeons you can go to that it changes all the time. So you can actually target what kind of loot you're after. And so that change really allows me, again, agency as a player to say, what's really weak about my build right now are my gloves. So what dungeons are dropping gloves right now, and I can go and work on that dungeon.
Can you go into a little bit of detail about how the loot has changed?
Yeah, as you said, loot is really a key component of any Diablo game, right? And we think that the legendary powers really bring a level of variability and sort of the ability for all unlimited possibilities. Really, you can get a crazy legendary power, and then that really opens the door for you to think like, well, what could be out there? It could be anything. And so in Diablo 4, we've decoupled the legendary power from the legendary item itself. You've still got unique items, which are making a return from Diablo 2, that really ground that this item has this legacy and this special power associated with. But for legendary items, the powers can roll on different items. And in fact, you can take the legendary power off of an item and apply it to another item. You can even upgrade a rare item to a legendary item through this. So you have a lot more ability to customize loadout in that way.
Yeah, like the skills are a foundation, right? Like when you're making your character, you use the skills are a template for what you want your build to be. Oh, I want to be a whirlwind barbarian, or I want to be a summoning necromancer. But it's really the legendary gear you get that helps you like refine that, because it ends up sort of overpowering it a little bit. And my example most recently is playing as a necro. I had a pair of gloves drop that gave me an extra 2 mages, skeletal mages. So now I have this large number of mages behind me that are just destroying everything. And then you progress, and as you go up in level, that those pair of gloves becomes kind of weaker and weaker, because it's no longer at your level. And in the past, you'd have to sort of get rid of those gloves, lose those 2 mages, and go, okay, my build isn't what I wanted it to be anymore. Well, now in Diablo 4, you can go to the occultist, you can extract that power off those gloves, get another legendary at your level and put it onto that. And so then you can carry that in your build forward even longer. And you can actually sort of like put all these affixes or all these powers into your stash. So you're like, oh, I may not need it now, so I'll extract it and put it in my stash for later, because maybe my build will change as I play. But there's a little bit of restriction. You can only pass it on once, so you can't just sort of keep that power for the entire time. But that ability to make a build and hold on to it for a little bit longer, and the fact that never before have you been able to take a yellow or what we call a rare item and turn it into a legendary by putting the legendary power into it, like that fundamentally changes how loot works.
That's so good to hear. One of the things that I think really stands out in the trailer that you guys just released are world bosses. Can you talk about what exactly goes into a world boss, how there are a bunch of different players that all populate in the same world? Just kind of go over what world bosses are all about.
Yeah, absolutely. World bosses are one of the most exciting things that we've added to the open world. I mean, alongside strongholds where you get to actually transform the world.
Right.
But in a world boss, we pull the camera out farther so you can see other players in combat with the boss, and we make these enormous bosses that, even though we pulled the camera out, fill the whole screen, and they're just wreaking havoc everywhere. You can see the treasure beast in the video we just saw, who's one of our 3 world bosses at launch, and they appear in the world on the map. And players can congregate. They're notified that a world boss is going to show up. Players can congregate. You don't have to be explicitly grouped or in a party with anyone. You'll just see other players there, and you all work together to take down this giant monster.
Can you talk a little bit about how PvP is going to be different in Diablo 4 compared to previous titles?
Yeah, absolutely. So we knew that we wanted to bring PvP back in Diablo 4. There's so many players that have fond memories of getting players' ears in Diablo 2, and we wanted to recapture that experience. So when we looked at how to bring it into the shared open world of D4, we settled on an approach of defining some areas of the world that are these fields of hatred that are affected by Mephisto's influence. And when you go into one of these areas, we tell you that you are at risk of being attacked by other players. There are both players and monsters in these areas, so there's some opportunity to fight monsters or fight players, and you can have engagements where you're fighting some monsters and a player jumps you. There's a lot of really different organic things that can emerge there. So when you're in one of these areas, you can get access to this special currency, these shards of hatred that you can exchange for exclusive cosmetic rewards that you can show off your victories. But in order to exchange them, you have to purify them first, and the purifying process takes place in this zone. Other people are notified that this is happening, and so you're in danger during that time. And if you're killed, you can lose your shards there. So there's a lot of interesting risk and reward dynamic.
And then finally, you touched upon it a little bit earlier with like the Paragon system and the Nightmare dungeons, but what is waiting people in the end game? Can you break down kind of what's in store for people in the post game?
Yes. So we know that a Diablo game shouldn't end when you complete the campaign. And the end game is a really important thing. And we wanted Diablo 4 to have end game available at launch. And so we've been working to make sure that the end game systems are robust and that there's a good variety of them. Rod mentioned the Tree of Whispers, which sends you on missions all around the world. These missions show up on the map. You can complete these whispers for additional rewards. And those also give you access to the Nightmare sigils that I mentioned earlier. Those will take you into nightmare dungeons, which
It's kind of a take on it's sort of the Diablo 4 take on rifts, right? As people think about what the end game was for Diablo 3 and Greater Rifts, like Nightmare Dungeons are kind of a version of that, yes?
All right, well, Rod, Joe, thank you so much for your time. Diablo 4 releases in 2023 on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation. And thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, for everything else, keep it here on IGN.
Quiet. Shut up. They have our scent. Run!